I'm a Filipino American and 13 years old, born and raised in California. I also have an 8-year-old brother, and my parents are both alive. Summer of 2013, on the last weekend before class, my family decided that a trip to Six Flags would be nice. My mom let me go on my own since my brother doesn't want to go with me. They just told me to meet them at the main plaza at 7 p.m. I went to almost all of the rides, and when I was about to ride the 5-seater roller coaster, I forgot the name. Nobody was in my lane, so I was alone. Then a bunch of 14-year-old and 15-year-old boys lined up on my lane, and I was stuck there as the only girl. At first, I was completely fine with that. They weren't doing anything to me or bothering me at all. But I was getting worried because they were nudging and whispering to each other, then glancing at me. When we were boarding the platform, they purposely, I think, chose both sides. Then I was stuck in the middle. Here's the arrangement from left to right. Dude 1, Dude 2, then me, Dude 3, and Dude 4. And then when the ride started and nobody could back out anymore, I felt 2 hands groping my legs. I jolted and I looked at them, but they were smirking. "Enjoy the ride, girl," one of them said. At this point, I'm completely freaking out. I was looking forward for the ride to end. Minutes seemed like hours. The guy on the right kept his hand on my legs and also was staring at me and occasionally winking at me. I really didn't have the guts to tell them off, because God knows what else they could do. At the end of the ride, I bolted and ran for the exit. I heard their footsteps too, and I went to the nearest safest place that I could find, the restroom. I was panting and heaving so hard, and I stalled for a few minutes, and I peered out to see if they had followed me. I saw them looking at the door, and they caught me looking at them. This time I was really afraid, because they had more friends with them. There was like 10 to 15 in total. I didn't know what to do, so I just called my mom to pick me up at the restroom, and I told her the reason why, and minutes later she was at the door. We walked out, and I saw that they weren't there anymore. This happened when I was around 11 or 12, during the summer holidays. About me at the time. Male, about 5 feet tall, out of shape, and very shy. I was traveling with my parents in Europe, and we had been to Barcelona and Paris before, with our next destination being in Tarragona, in Spain, where an amusement park called PortAventura was located. We had scheduled to stay there in one of the hotels for 4 days to visit the park, water park, and beach club. Now the story I'm about to tell happened on the 3rd day in the main park. It was getting late, and most of the areas of the parks were closed, except for the Mediterranean area, as a show with fountains, lights, and fireworks was being held over the lake that night, as it was the week of the park's anniversary. I asked my parents if we could stay and watch the show, but they were much too tired after an entire day of running around the amusement park, and needed to go to the information desk to make sure that things we had brought were properly sent to our hotel room. I reluctantly obliged. As we were at the information center, I felt the need to go to the bathroom. I asked my mother if I could go and where the nearest one was. Turns out, the closest one is at the edge of the Mediterranean area. My parents were busy at the info desk, and I have no siblings, so they just told me to go alone. I wish I had waited for them to be done though, so I could have gone with my dad, because what transpired was pretty traumatizing. So I navigated back to the Mediterranean area into the bathrooms. The whole area was pretty busy, and lots of people were crowded by the edge of the lake to watch the show. I entered the bathroom and went on with my business at a urinal, until I noticed a man looking towards me. I normally don't like when people stare at me, as I was shy, but this time, instead of embarrassed, I felt in danger. I glanced back at the man. He was about 6 feet tall and maybe mid-20s, with a well-built physique, very short hair, almost shaved, Caucasian, and wearing a gray hoodie, dark blue jeans, and black leather boots. It immediately struck me as the kind of person that you wouldn't find in an amusement park. He was standing in front of the second urinal, as if he was using it, but I had a feeling that he wasn't. I noticed him glancing over at me a few more times. I was finally done and eager to leave. I tried to pass behind him, and as I did, I noticed he tried to reach for me. I barely avoided his hand, and he grunted while I made a whimpering noise. The bathroom is very crowded, so no one noticed it. As I neared the exit, he left his urinal. I left the restrooms and looked over at the lake. The show had finally started, and there were images being displayed on the water of the fountains with a projector. And loud music was blasting on all of the speakers. I tried to blend into the crowd, hoping to lose him. After about a minute of making my way through the cluster of people, I looked back. Not even 10 meters behind me, there he was, following behind, through the same pass between the herd that I had cut through. He now had his hood up, covering his face, but I could feel him staring me down. I also noticed that he was now wearing what I think were black fingerless gloves. Alarms were going off in my head, as my previous stance on the situation went from weird and creepy to dangerous. I turned and started to desperately get to an area that I could run away to. After a few more seconds of squeezing through people, I reached the final stretch of the lakeside pathway. It was empty and too far away from the main show for anyone to be there, yet the speakers were still playing loudly there. Ahead was a maintenance side path, with the gate slightly ajar, and to the left was a turn leading back to the plaza with the Info Central building. I ran as fast as my asthmatic, out-of-shape self could towards the turn. I could hear this man running behind me, with his boots getting louder and louder. He was gaining on me. I started to panic and I ran even faster, but he was still getting closer. I had reached the turn and changed direction so fast that I leaned towards the ground and nearly slipped. I felt motion behind me as if someone had taken a swing at me, and I could hear the man complain in a language that I didn't recognize. My working theory is that it was Russian, but it was some Slavic dialect for sure. I kept running through the plaza, directly to the information building, but I didn't hear the man running anymore. I turned around and saw him slip into the service gate at the end of the street. I ran inside the building and grabbed my mom's leg, stuttering and almost crying, but she was occupied with the lady at the counter, and though she saw me distressed, told me to go sit and wait, and tell her when we left. I tried to protest, but she wouldn't listen and was paying keen attention to the lady. As I walked over to sit in one of the chairs, I looked out of the door and scanned the plaza. I didn't notice anything at first and almost looked away, but I saw something behind a directions sign, posted next to a tree, in the most remote and dark corner of the plaza. It was the man. We made eye contact. I turned away and sat in the chair furthest from the entrance. When we were leaving, I looked over in the same direction again, and he wasn't there anymore. I told my parents, but since I had a vivid imagination as a kid, they chalked it up to me being paranoid because I was alone, and that even if it were real, there were way too many witnesses for someone to try and pull something of the sort. I wasn't very happy to be called a liar about this, but considering how thick-skulled my parents can be, I didn't insist. I was just happy to have gone unscathed. As I was typing my story out, I realized how bad my situation was. The people around me at the time were distracted by the show, so no one would have seen me get taken. And with the loud music, no one would have heard me scream or struggle. And the fact that the maintenance gate was open and I saw the man enter it means I almost ran right to where he wanted me. To think that I almost got kidnapped right next to a crowd of people boggles my mind. I've never gone alone anywhere in an amusement park since. My daughter is 13, and she and her friend were allowed to go off on their own at a really large amusement park, a couple of hours from where we live. I didn't have a problem with that. The parents that she was with were people that I trust, and they're all good kids that she was going off with, so I didn't think that anything could happen to her. I was horribly wrong. She met a boy there, and he told her that he was 16 or so, and they, him, her, and 2 other girls started to hang out for the day. He immediately attached himself to her, getting friendly and flattering her. She thought he was cute, so everything was good in her mind. As the day progresses, he starts to encourage her to stay at the park instead of going home with her friends and their family. She says no, that she can't because we are 2 hours away and can't come get her. But he persists, and when she refuses, he wants her to come the following weekend and meet with him again, alone. She comes home and tells us about this kid, and really, we didn't think that much about it until we realized a few things. He was at the park completely alone. I've been to that park many times and have never seen someone that was obviously alone there. People always have someone with them, especially a teenage boy. We have no doubt that he would have been there with an adult watching him and waiting to see who he can lure away. He also didn't have a cell phone, a Facebook account, email, or anything else of that nature. In fact, he had her create a Facebook account so that they could keep in touch, using her own email address. She snapped a photo of him, and he is not 16. I would say more in his early 20s. He also did everything that he could to convince her to leave her friends, stay late at the park, and go alone with him the next weekend. He said everything exactly right. He had her thinking that they had a good connection as she had with her previous, very innocent relationship that was with someone who ended up becoming her best friend while they were together. He also said that he was from one of the Eastern Bloc countries, but he didn't have an accent. But if she called his house, whoever answered had a very thick accent and spoke in Russian, or some similar language. Additionally, it was always a male that answered the phone, and male voices in the background. He lied to her about things in order to have her feel connected to him. And I'm not going to give more specific details here. In the end, we were very confident that he was a recruiter for a sex slavery, or something of that nature. I know I'm not being paranoid here. I know that it sounds like it, but I am not the type to be really worried about their child and really overprotective. My daughter is 13 and has looked 16 for a couple of years already. She blossomed early and has an hourglass figure. The guy almost completely ignored her friends. Everything points to the fact that I could have lost my daughter that day if she didn't have a good head on her shoulders. If she would have gone with him, I have no doubt in my mind that I would have never seen her again.